Nutcase.
I don't know.
Nutcase.
I feel like that's more age, Alex.
Is it my body getting weaker? I was hoping it was me getting lighter.
Hello and welcome. My name's J.E. and with me today is my good old friend, Alexander Gonzalez.
I'm just slowly dying.
Whoa, God, okay. And with us today, special returning guest, Jacob McCourt of the Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast. How are you doing today, Jacob?
I'm doing great. It is wonderful to be back, to be a returning champion on your show. And let me tell you, I have a fun concept for us to explore today.
Oh, we are very
I'm excited.
Yeah. Just for reference, if you guys want to go back to Jacob's episode of We Are Not Game Devs, it is IP 89, Steel City, a banger of a game.
Mm-hmm.
It is, oh my God, what a fantastic game.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, definitely. It should have been a game already, but it hasn't. But yeah, please remember that we are not game devs. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's hot. What is it? August 26th. So this is going to sound crazy to you guys, but I only have a month and a half left of summer. It ends right at usually in October and maybe at the worst right at Halloween.
Did you just say summer ends in October?
Yeah, we didn't clean up our act with the environment. So you can go in the pool after you go trick-or-treating.
Wild.
What's the temperature up there for you, Jacob?
So, like, it's deceiving, right? Because some parts of Canada actually touch, like, the top part of California. So where I am in one of the more, like, southern cities in Canada. So, like, we have a pretty temperate climate. Like,
okay,
it's usually, like, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, like, during the day. And our winter, or rather our fall, will probably come in mid-October. So, like, not too far off.
Huh.
Now, I have an ignorant question.
Please.
And I know that parts of Canada have to be rural just because there's so much space. So that means people space out, and that means they can do rural things like own livestock and kind of be by themselves, and that changes the mindset. How is Letterkenny, is there really accurate portrayals of people like that out there?
Yeah, Letterkenny is like Letterkenny is a show. I don't know where it airs in the US, but essentially it's like a bunch of like hockey bros and their stories. And like that is real, like rural Ontario. Like it's based on truth. Like I can't make it up. You can't make that stuff up. It's based on truth.
And what I like about that show is it made me feel better living in a rural area, because Canada is kind of put on a pedestal where it's like, it looks like you guys got your shit together all the time.
Well, hey, I'm actually going to kind of tear that down today. So I'm excited to get into this game concept because it flows directly into what we're just talking about here.
Well, that being said, those are not the Canadians we are talking about today. Maybe. Today, we are creating something new. Every week, We Are Not Game Devs will create a new, exciting video game idea that we have always wanted to play, but not have any knowledge or know-how to create the wonderful experience that are video games. Today, Jacob will present us with We Are Not Game Devs, 118th IP. Take it away, Jacob.
Okay. So, I want to ask a question to start. How much do you guys know about Canadian politics?
Ooh.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and be completely honest. I know what I know is I know some Trudeau hot facts. I know that he's charming. I know that when he set up the online system for your guys' pay during coronavirus, that it just worked off the bat and you guys got $2,000. Yep. I know that that he's more liberal in a sense than what we have down here. But I also know that in Canada, because of it being so spread out, that there are rural places, so much so that there are places that fly the Confederate flag, which I think is...
Really?
Yeah, it's a thing. Yes, in
Jacob,
certain rural
confirm?
places.
There are some rural areas in Western Canada that may or may not fly Confederate flags.
Huh. And I don't know, and I'm not saying it's a lot of people. I'm just saying there have been photographs, and that surprised the hell out of me.
No,
but
that surprised
I
me
think
just
it's more
hearing it.
about like the way they look at the culture differently. It's not the
Mhm,
same as
mhm.
how people here, at least this is how I'm taking it. It's not the same as how people here fly the Confederate flag, but more like they appreciate the Southern
Yeah.
culture in a different way.
And if I know some Texans and a couple of them also view the Confederate flag a little bit differently than specifically, of course, Californians view the Confederate flag, let alone the rest of America. But
yeah.
that
And just to, it's a weird
Canada's
thing,
pretty
though.
high, far north. So it's just an interesting idea to me.
but
Yeah,
that's
so-
that's all I really know. I'd say I'm largely ignorant about it all.
Okay, well, I specifically, my idea revolves around the idea of Wexit. Have you guys heard of this at all? Wexit?
No. What?
I mean, I think it only sounds familiar because of Brexit and all similar type of words like that. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming
so
it's like departing from the main government.
Yeah, so I want to preface this by a statement that just says, as a Canadian, I would never want this to happen. This is a piece of fiction we are developing. We're having fun. But around the time Brexit happened, there was this broad generalization where Western provinces, so Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, which are three of our Western provinces, we have 10 in the country, they felt like they were not necessarily being heard by the government that was in power. So there was a lot of stuff on social media that was saying, hey, we want to, create our own country. We want to Wexit. And so my idea today revolves around the idea of Wexit.
Okay.
So I want to just set the scene, and then I don't have the type of game or ideas of where it can go, but like I just want to see where we can take it. So
So off the bat, being where I was raised, this sounds like a full-blown Canadian Civil War. And I feel like, and to me, I'm like, if 2020 needs anything else, is what we need to do is our ideas infect Canada. And for the worst part, they end up turning on each other. Or you guys end up turning on each other. I would absolutely hate it. I'd be like, man, you were our rock in a sense.
I think that and again, these are broad generalizations, but like Canadians, I think would just be like, yeah, you don't represent what we are looking for. So like, we're just going to go off and do our own thing rather than like
Fighting.
a full civil war.
Yeah.
But the idea that I have is actually that we're talking like 10 or 15 years down the road, a conservative government comes into power and they find a way to make Wexit happen. And I actually don't know how that is possible, but like they find a way to make sure that those three provinces create their own country that leaves Canada. Okay. When that happens, a lot of stuff happens as like when countries kind of separate. At first, there's high levels of unrest. There's high levels of unemployment, there's high prices on essential items, and crime starts to rise. So in addition to separating from Canada, what this government does in this new country is they create a social credit system in the country. Do you guys know what a social credit system is?
Not by name.
Okay, so the social credit system is something that's being run in China right now. And a social credit system essentially says like, hey, I am man X. Every single thing that I do in this country is monitored and measured by the government. And depending on how I act in the world, I can be arrested. So let's say I post something about the government on social media that the government doesn't like. If I do it a bunch of times, I can be arrested. If I throw garbage on the ground, I can get points taken off my social credit score and eventually be fined or thrown in jail. So my idea is two parts. Part of Canada leaves and creates their own country, and that country creates a social credit system. Think about it like watchdogs, right? Where like people will watch down on you and will make sure that you're doing things that are deemed, good for the country. And so that is my idea. Let's build what this game is, because I don't know what kind of game it is.
Yeah, no, I already have a general path I might want to take with this.
Yeah.
My first question is, who do you see being the good guys, quote unquote, here? Like,
I don't think there is any.
That was what I was going to say, is that it'll kind of be open to your interpretation.
I guess my question is, where do you see our protagonists being? More part of the more like conservative, like almost, I wouldn't say communist, but like the more extreme side that decided to branch off, or the ones that kind of got screwed over?
I
in
have
the
an
deal?
idea for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of it making a protagonist, what's really easy to me is I think the main character should be a teenager. It's right at the time that you start to question everything that's going on. So you could be in the conservative side, or you can be someone that moved over. But during that teenage state is when I'm sure the social credit system will be kicking in more because you're becoming an adult, but at the same time, you're always questioning authority and kind of pushing the bounds.
I like
Okay.
that. I like
Yeah.
that. I like that a lot.
So just
'Cause
someone
the-
that's not too not young, but too like young in terms of you're not in society yet where you could make real like changes in terms of politics and stuff. And that is like the main character in between all of this political conflict. Is that what you mean, Alex?
Yeah, in the sense that they're kind of butting in. So they're going to have their own beliefs going in based off their family and what they've learned. But at the same time, they're still impressionable and have a lot of questions, and they're not quite as set in their ways as someone much older would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excuse me.
Yeah, because the way I saw it is I saw like that you may play multiple protagonists, or you may play like multiple parties, right? Like you'll have multiple stories, like, but this kind of covers it, where like you can take the story in the way that you want, and not to say that this government, this government goes hard left and like, or I guess hard right in this case, but like they go hard right and they just become evil. Like we're villainizing, like we're not villainizing a specific type of politics. We're just saying like these people like become authoritarians, and like this is what is happening in this made up country now. But I do like the fact that like you have one character, he's very impressionable, he's young, he doesn't know his politics, and he chooses who he helps.
You said exactly where my mind is going right now. So as both of you guys were talking about all of that, a game specifically came to mind in terms of story, what we could do, or like a path for your protagonist, quote unquote. If any of you guys have played Outer Worlds, I don't think you have, Alex, but have you, Jacob?
No, I have not.
I've played it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so in Outer Worlds, there's multiple governments, but there's two primary governments, right? And as the protagonist in Outer Worlds, you could choose either to help everyone else or become hired by this government and essentially bring the capitalist rule throughout the entire galaxy, right? So I feel like this is a perfect game for that kind of storytelling, where you as the player, once you start going around the world and learning about both parties and kind of figuring out what's going on in this world, you could totally choose one or the other. It's not that there's a story for just one path. You could be like, I totally support this separated government, or you want to fight them back and then try to unify everything. Go for it, Alex.
I want to interject,
yeah,
but I don't want to be rude about it.
Yeah.
One thing I want to do is I want to make the social score system prevalent, but I want it to be something that's a slow burn. So I want it to be something that he just kind of accepts. I'm saying he right now because I'm picturing me. It could be a woman. It could be whoever. And I want it to be something where at first, it updates here and there. And then as the game progresses, all of a sudden you see it start changing more and more. And then then somehow becomes a thing where as a player, I imagine I'm playing it and I'm just like, okay, what does that action do? Oh, fuck, man. And I look over and it's like, boop, 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 and it changes just a little bit more. That way it feels like you can feel the government all around you in a sense. I kind of want to have a foreboding feeling.
Like the social credit system, I think would make a really cool karma system in this game.
Exactly. Yes.
But it doesn't have to
it's-
necessarily be like how Skyrim and Fallout does it, where if you steal
it's not
something,
black and white.
Yeah.
In fact, that's going to be part of the mystery about the social credit system is sometimes you're going to think that
Yes.
you're doing good, and then all of a sudden maybe you just lose 1 point. So then it'll throw the player off like, wait, was that arbitrary? No, I don't think it is because everything else has made sense. And then it'll kind of
Here's an
go from
example
there.
where I think it could do something ambiguous like that. Let's say you have a side quest where you're trying to help out a small business, right? And then you help them out, and at the end, you find out the small business is doing something kind of corrupt, and so you steal from the small business, but then you lose social credit points because you don't know this at the time, but you find out that small business is actually trying to help the government. And so you stealing from this company or small business, even if they're doing something wrong, essentially that's going against the government. So your social credit goes down because you're trying to stop the new government from whatever their big objective is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there will be small stuff like that too. I can imagine you helping an elderly neighbor, maybe like you talk to them and you get their internet hooked back up. And then you find out that increases your social credit score. And as you're like going about eating your dinner, all of a sudden your social credit score lowers because the old timer ends up posting some scathing messages that you didn't know about. So then it comes back to you and you're like, what? So
like
for
if
me
you
in
treat
this
someone
game,
rude or something.
yeah, or you end up helping someone that ends up going against the government in some way. So
Right.
it wasn't you directly, but because you enabled them, it'll kind of go from there. So all of a sudden, your actions are going to further have consequences as it makes waves. So for me, this game's like, as we're kind of building the skeleton, it seems almost like a social game where you're going to be playing through. It's going to have, I guess to say it the only way I know how, a social RPG element where there's going to be that karma system. And then I would even think you could do some, because they are a teenager, you could level up their social skill, which will give you more nuanced speaking abilities as you learn.
And see, when you said the word social, I was like, are you talking about social media? Like, are we going to have a part of this game that's like Hypnospace Outlaw? I don't know if you've seen that game.
I haven't seen it,
not.
but as you said, social media, I was like, I feel like that could be a mechanic in this game as well. On top of the social credit system, this karma system, you also have a social media presence where maybe exactly what you said, Alex, where leveling up your social media presence gives you more dialogue options. Like that is your dialogue skill tree is becoming more and more popular. So you could say more things without being
absolutely
harassed or whatever.
And I think just as, and it makes sense to the player, and I think it makes sense to me in the sense like 3 times now, that when I was younger and I would get kind of confuddled in arguments, or maybe I didn't understand my emotions, I wouldn't express it the best way. And now that I'm a bit older, I can kind of go through those emotions and maybe have a conversation that's more nuanced, more complex with somebody and navigate it much better. So I could see that happening as well.
Yeah. So what's cool in my mind is like the idea that your protagonist is a teenager and, is kind of a blank slate politically, but like 2, anyone that says games are not political, they're wrong because games are political.
Oh, yeah.
And what's cool is I think people will come into this game with their own set of politics, and they may have to, because at first I don't think that there's going to necessarily be like an evil bad guy. Like they're not going to see the government as being evil. You're just going to be living your life. But people are going to bring their own politics into it, which is cool. Does this game need like a bad guy or like a hey, this is what the government's doing that's actually wrong?
The way I imagine it goes is there's going to be leaders on both sides of the parties, correct? And both of them, I feel like they don't have to be likable, but they both have qualities that you're going to love and you're going to hate. Like, and in terms of also the political beliefs and the policies of both governments are going to have things that most people, if you just give any random person, look at these policies and look at these policies, I think on both sides, there's going to be something you're going to disagree with and something you agree with.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's going to be, both of them are going to have very like different beliefs and ideologies that'll play to someone's beliefs in a way where it's like you're going to choose this government because you believe the majority of things, or you're going to go with the other one because you believe in the majority of things. But you're not going to be fully behind any one of their decisions. They're both going to be pretty shitty in the end, is where
I do want to add on to that. I want there to be, this isn't going to be a horror game by any means, but I do want there to be a slightly scary element. Basically, I don't know if you guys have ever had that feeling where, like, if you're involved with the government, they are such a huge ship. And like, if you get cast under their microscope, you feel very small. And kind of that, I want that feeling to be communicated in the game so that it does feel scary sometimes when you're like, oh my God, there's this huge element that's, you don't know who they are, where they're going, what their moves are, but they know you.
Yeah.
And they can contact you at any time. And I think that's where the phone thing would be interesting too, where maybe there would be messages, like little alerts that would come in too, that at first when you were a child, you thought was almost like a guardian angel. We could even present it that way, like a guiding hand. Maybe that's how the TV's going to put it. And then eventually, as you sort of start to branch out and make your own decisions in life, you feel it more oppressively, or maybe you don't. But you'll always feel it like in the back, like someone's watching you. I want that to be in the game.
So as you were saying that until the very end, even, I was thinking we could add a whole like Big Brother is watching kind of feel to it, where I don't know exactly how the game's going to play out yet, but I can imagine you're going to try to get certain people into certain areas so you could talk to them privately, or you're going to hack into certain databases to try and find some information out. But let's say you're caught either via surveillance camera, or someone is in the crowd seeing you do something that you don't want that person to see you doing that. There's always going to be, I think stealth is going to be a huge aspect of this game, where you're going to have to do most of the big decisions secretively, or even if you want to get caught for a specific reason, you get caught on purpose to like bring up your social credit to a certain side that you want it to go to. So I think the majority of the gameplay is going to be you scoping out certain areas, whether that be through blueprints or doing like recon missions or something. You go there and then you try to bring out the person you're trying to talk to into a secluded place where no cameras or people could interrupt you, so you don't get caught doing this. Because I feel like every little thing that you do, if the wrong side sees you doing it, it's going to hurt your status in whatever side you're trying to influence.
Now, I have a question for you, Jacob. How do you see this game being played? Do you see it like maybe first person, or do you see it like third person and we get to see the character? Where do you see that?
See, it's funny because when we first started talking, my thought was like, I thought this more of like an RTS actually. Like I thought like that this game would be based on like a Frostpunk. I don't know if you've played Frostpunk, but like I thought of that, the camera being very pulled out and like your character like having to go around. But now that we've developed the game this way, I almost see it exclusively as a third person action game. Like
now,
I don't see it some other way.
I've been suggesting a lot of ideas, but I kind of figured out how I want this game to feel a little bit scary. I want it to be where there's a daily radio broadcast and maybe like a TV broadcast. And I want it to be at first that seems innocuous. The leader's just talking, they're very charismatic, and it feels like the messages are general. But as you start developing and go from there, you find out later in the game that it's actually not general. Where all of a sudden they're speaking, and then it seems like, wait, is he talking about what I'm doing? It could be that he's talking about what I'm doing. And then eventually towards the later end of the game, you're like, oh no, he's definitely commenting on my actions. Like the government sponsored TV or radio broadcast will be talking to you and you just never knew.
Mm-hmm. And I also want there to be I feel like this map is going to be pretty explorable and you could walk to different sections and different provinces. And even there's going to be some cities that are controlled by a certain government and then another one by the opposing government, right? And so the radio broadcast or the TV show that you see in either side are going to be saying different things at any given time, depending on which province you're in, if that makes any sense. So like the propaganda you hear is going to be different.
Yeah, the thing I was going to bring up is that the difference between the US and Canada is that in Canada, we have like a multi-party system. So like instead of having 2 major parties, we have like, I want to say 5 major parties. But the way in this game I see it is that there's a government that's in power. And then I don't know if we're actually part of like a minority party, the opposition, or are we part of like a resistance group? I think that's where I'm like, are we just the opposition party or are we the resistance?
What if you get different suggestions depending on the radio stations you listen to? We could leave it up to the player, and depending on how you listen to them, that'll generate quests, like the broadcast will, where all of a sudden they'll start talking about, we need volunteers in this province. Here things are, or in your city now, we're having trouble reaching the youth. And you're like, okay, well maybe I should talk to kids. And then you'll listen to another broadcast and it's like, wait, hold on, they're having trouble with food because they keep spending the money on the military, for instance. I'm just throwing it out to very general. So then all of a sudden, depending on what you do, it is affecting your social score and kind of steering you.
Ooh,
and not just that, but let's say you help out that military party, but then in turn, you don't know this, but that other quest that you had lined up where you're helping out the kids and the youth, you actually fail that because you're like stealing food from the kids if you were to take that food and bring it to that military party. You know what I mean?
Resources are finite. Yeah, definitely. I could see that happening. Or they spin it that way.
Yeah.
Where, they'll say on the broadcast later, like, we didn't have enough volunteers, where it's very subtle. Like, there weren't enough volunteers to help the children. There were some hungry mouths that day due to some people who didn't want to contribute as they should to society. Right. And then they'll kind of steer in that different way. Because the way I see it is almost like how social media and Instagram targets ads towards you as they get to know you more and more.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And that like maybe there's not even like the president or the prime minister or whatever the leader is called. Maybe they're not even a real person, and maybe it's like a computer algorithm that like
oh
my god,
we're getting a Westworld here now.
Yeah.
I could even see that where the algorithm changes its many faces to suit its constituents. So now all of a sudden it's massively appealing for that reason. And maybe that's why you're like, I could even see in the teenager, I kind of want to stop here. Does the teenager, like, do they have a voice, or is it going to be all dialogue? Or how much are we going to imprint ourselves onto them?
Well, like the way we're setting it up is that there's almost going to be, and this is a little further on from where we are, but like it almost sounds like the social credit score is one thing, but then also your character is going to have like a political leaning, whether it's like I'm going to be on this side of the fence or this side of the fence with the government, or I'm going to be part of the resistance, right? Yeah. So I just wonder, like, and now I'm putting my producer hat on, I'm like, what's more feasible? Like us just having like written dialogue? Is it going to be like a CRPG where like there is just so much dialogue like Disco Elysium? Or is it going to be like less dialogue and voiced?
I feel like it's going to have to be more along the sense of like voiced with multiple lines, but it's going to kind of have, I think it's going to be like the old school Fallouts where everyone else has voice lines, but your character doesn't. It's going to be like you have 4 or 5, maybe even 6 choices of dialogue you could say, but none of them are going to be voiced because they're going to change depending on what path you decide to take. And at first we were talking about it one government or the other. We could even make it Fallout New Vegas style, where there are, like you said, 4 or 5 different parties you could potentially join. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be binary or even 3 different factions, as you would say in video games, that you have to join. But eventually you're going to have to not pick one, but pick one to back by the end game. And that's the one you're going to try to overthrow the government or try to take, or if you're trying already the one that already overthrew it, to confirm their presence or whatever.
I want there to also be a neutral ending that kind of leaves just like a very like a meh taste in your mouth, where maybe you don't commit to any of them, and it's just like they all just keep fighting and you just don't know where to go, and you're just as confused, and maybe you give up and they win because of that. You just don't participate anymore.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And I also think there should be, quote unquote, a bad ending. I don't know if this is a bad ending or not, where like you're fully against this government that has taken over and left the country. And then you work with, like, let's say the resistance group, and then your resistance group contacts like the United States or something. And then you bring on like a whole front from the US in to like kind of help out and stuff like that.
Yeah. Cause there could be a point where like you get your social credit score so low that you're just imprisoned. So that could be one ending where like you're just such a like so damaging to society that like you have to be imprisoned. That could be one bad ending.
Yeah, maybe everyone just hates you, and so yeah, you're just thrown in prison.
Yeah, there could literally be like 20, 25 endings depending on like what political party you're backing and then like what your social credit score is.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, just off the top of my head, I can see 4 different endings for prison, where maybe one, you join the resistance and due to your actions it fails and you end up in prison. Another one where maybe a massive smear campaign is run against you, and all your neighbors turn on you, and then that's how you end up in prison. There's definitely a lot of ways we could go through this. The more we're starting to talk about it, it feels like a game where there's not going to be, you're not going to be picking up a sword. You're not going to be brandishing a gun here. I mean, there may be moments of physical violence that maybe people enact on you or you enact on somebody else, depending on how extreme you take it. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the core of this game. The core of this game is going to be talking, experiencing.
Yeah.
I almost want there to be a journal as well, just paper and pencil. That way it's like it's their exclusive thoughts that they are having, so that you can kind of reflect and look back and be like, oh, okay, this is kind of where the game's going, just to check in a little bit.
I'm glad that you brought up combat, because in terms of combat and generally what you're doing throughout the game, I see combat as a very situational thing that'll happen from time to time. For example, and this is also how I see combat working, is let's say you're about to talk to a guy that you have to be kind of confrontational about it, and you got a lot of evidence to kind of like go against him. If you bring up a bunch of evidence against him, it doesn't end in combat and you could just talk him down, right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't bring enough, you will have to go through a combat sequence. But I don't see it working like QTE. I see it just as a cutscene. You see them get in the scuffle. And depending on if you win or lose, I want that to be in context of how you have built out your character. And what I mean by that is, let's say you go into that conversation without enough evidence to go against this guy, but you got from another side quest, like you beat it, and then he like hands you brass knuckles, and it's like, you might need this someday.
Yeah.
And so you win that combat if you get in combat later, because this friend gave you brass knuckles from the side quest. But if you didn't do that side quest and you didn't get the brass knuckles, you lose that combat sequence, and the story continues. You know what I'm saying? So like, depending on what you have on your person in terms of certain conversations, if you happen to get into combat, you could win or lose.
So you're saying that combat scenarios are not binary, that like there may be 4 outcomes from like a fight, where like you win the fight and you kill someone, you win the fight and you just beat somebody up.
Yeah.
You kill the fight, you win the fight, or you lose the fight and you just end up beaten up, and you lose the fight and you get arrested.
Exactly.
So like I think what you were saying is like so many branching paths.
Right. Like in one of them, the one where you kill, it's like if you bring a gun or not. Like let's say you brought a gun with you, and you during the middle of the combat in the cutscene, you accidentally shoot the guy. Whereas if you didn't have the gun, you could just beat them up and you just win the fight or lose the fight. You know what I'm saying? So you that's exactly what I'm kind of talking about.
And you got to remember, so this game is you are a civilian in what is going to be kind of a postmodern society. So I don't even think I think a gun would be one of the more extreme options.
Yeah.
Like that would be one of those things that if your character took out a gun, in my head as a player, I'd be like, well, my game just fell off a cliff. I just got to see where it goes from here, because it's almost to the point where it's a no turning back situation. Even with a knife, with brass knuckles, I could see it where you bruise them up real bad, or maybe, you bloody them up, but it's not to the point where you would kill somebody. I think once you kill somebody, that's where the game kind of advances. Where if it were like a choose your own adventure book, it'd be like, well, I don't have many pages left of this.
Yeah.
You're kind of going through it
to page 300.
Yeah, and you're like, oh boy.
Just remember the social credit system, right? So if you kill someone, like your score is 0, and you're going to prison. Imagine there are cameras everywhere, and you're constantly being tracked with facial recognition, whatever. I don't want to call it a police state, but it's very, I don't want to call it militarized either, but the social credit system has really taken over. And so if you even pull a knife, your score is dropping hundreds of points in an instant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I feel like those type of instances will be, you don't even know at the time the choice you're making. Let's say very, very early on during the beginning of a side quest, one of your friends offers you that gun and is like, hey, you might need this in the future. And then 5 hours later, that's when that gun comes up again. And then in the middle of a fight, you pull that gun. You're like, oh my God, I should have never brought it. I don't want to I don't want to use this. And then what happens,
Yeah. You could even get a tool later in the game that gives you access to the social credit system, where you can see on screen exactly the impact. We're talking 80% way through the game, exactly the point impact that what you're doing is about to have. It's hey, you pull a knife, you're going to lose approximately 30% of your social credit score and put yourself at risk of X, Y, Z.
And I really like that, where it's going to be almost a perk, for lack of a better words, where it's slowly unveiling the curtain and showing how much of an RPG this game is in the background, where it's running all of these different scenarios, calculating your social points, calculating what you've gotten, where your ideas are coming from, how strong your ideas are, and then kind of pushing it that way. And that way you can kind of see it and be like, oh, okay, if I pull a knife, I won't do so well, but if I punch him in the face, it turns out I can actually punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And I'll be okay.
And I can imagine even pretty late game stuff when everything's starting to roll down and you can see that the story is winding down to a climax and eventually epilogue. I could see in one branching path in this game, you gain control of the AI the main government is using, and then you could now even predict certain paths, get super Westworldy, where you eventually know what's going to happen before it even happens. And you could use that to your advantage or not. And that's only if you take a certain path to get there,
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Man, I mean, this is one. It's going to be such a branching paths game. This is definitely going to have multiple playthroughs, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be a short game at all. I feel like this is going to be one playthrough could last up to 45 hours. I feel.
I could definitely see that. Now I want there to be a feature at the end of this game where maybe there's a 2-minute cutscene that kind of cuts and pastes a bunch of different results that you would get together. And the reason I want that is I would definitely want to share this on my Twitter or wherever I can see my other gaming peeps and be like, this is what I got. What'd you guys get? Because this is crazy. I'd want to see where they went or how they ended up, because everyone's story is going to be really unique, where it's going to be a conversation point to talk about, oh, well, what happened here? Okay, well, what'd you do then? Well, okay, wait, you had what? You had leather gloves, so there were no fingerprints? Oh my God. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Going back to the Big Brother thing I was talking about, maybe that could translate over to every time you get either caught doing something or seen doing something, you'll get a replay on your social media not social media, the social cred system. It's a video of you and be like, watch out for this criminal or whatever, and then it'll like show an actual clip of you doing something, you know.
Yeah.
But that's only if you get caught.
Yeah, you get an email the morning after, and it's like, hey, we have video of you, and this is why you lost 20% of your social credit score.
Yeah, exactly.
Creepy.
All right. Let's talk about the music that we're listening to while we're playing all of this. I mean, all I hear really is like some super sci-fi, like, I don't know, like I'm like hearing like Blade Runner-esque type of soundtrack to this. What are you guys hearing?
How far in the future do you see this game being? Because I initially said like maybe like 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like my thought was like it's just like regular music.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know how much music is going to change over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I disagree with you, Jay, and I agree with Jacob. I think it should be more contemporary music where also there's going to be times where there's no music, where you're just walking around. I think there's going to be times where, since you have your phone with you, you can kind of put on maybe a couple different stations, maybe 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And then otherwise you'll hear whatever anyone else is playing.
Okay.
And
So, I mean, Canada, a place of very, very high talent, in my opinion. There's some great stuff that comes out of Canada. And I think Canadian musicians are very, very good in terms of the variety of music you get and just how many great Canadian artists there are. So maybe we could just get like a collaboration with a few artists that are
of different genres.
Of different genres of right now, and just have like them make a couple of things here and there, or even we just license some stuff out maybe.
Or like popular and this is just a wild idea. Popular Canadian artists will have their own like curated radio stations or curated playlists, and maybe there's some originals, some of their stuff, maybe some covers, maybe some other bands. But I think that I don't know if you guys know the rule about CanCon. Let me tell you all things Canada today. Do you guys know about CanCon?
I do not.
No.
So in Canada, we have rules around Canadian content. So on the radio, you have to have 30% of your music be from Canadian artists. And there's a system called Maple, I kid you not, MAPL, which dictates whether or not a song can be called Canadian.
Interesting. So I knew this about the film industry because I know making a movie in Canada is kind of difficult. It's not difficult, but it gets a little muddy when you're trying to work with SAG-AFTRA and Canadian, whatever the Canadian Guild is for actors up there. So I knew that existed, but I didn't know it encompassed any entertainment medium, really.
Yeah, and of course they had to name it Maple, but Maple stands for music artists. I worked in radio for a little while, so that's why like I remember this, like music artist performance lyrics, which means that depending on where, like a Drake song, right? You think that's a Canadian song, right? Depending on where it was like performed or where it was recorded or who wrote it, it may not be a Canadian song.
So what you're telling me, so I can understand it better, is Laugh Now, Cry Later was a music video filmed at the Nike campus in Oregon. So even though he is Canadian, he filmed it on a Nike campus, and the song isn't really having anything to do with Canada. It's not technically Canadian.
I wish it were that simple, but it's all about where the song was written, recorded, who wrote it, who performed it. Because, like, let's say it's a Drake and Future song, right? If Drake and Future wrote it, that means Drake is Canadian, Future is American. So that means that 0.5 out of 1, so 50% of one of the criteria is Canadian. I could go on about this, all to say that we have a system, and I think that like because it's kitschy and because we're sticking to Canadiana, I think we should stick to that. Like most of it should be Canadian.
Yeah. Definitely. That's definitely so interesting.
Yeah. You know what? That being said, I'm going to push a segment up way, way, way ahead. I'm springing this on you, Alex, but we're bringing something usually a little bit later right now. What game studio should make this game? I mean, if we're going all the way, it has to be Ubisoft, right? Like, it just has to be.
And see, I was saying it cannot be Ubisoft. Like, that is where my brain went, because Ubisoft with their open world games, like, they refuse to be political. Far Cry 5 is a political video game. And yet they were like, no, this game isn't political. I just don't know how, like, I love Ubisoft.
Yeah.
If Ubisoft wanted to hire me to work, I would be like, yes, I will go work for Ubisoft, please. But I don't know if this is a game that, at this present time, that I would want them to tackle.
Like, suits their political.
So it's just like, yeah, and maybe it's Clint Hawking, and maybe it's like his studio at Ubisoft Toronto that does it, because Watch Dogs Legion strikes me as a political game.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Far Cry 2, which he also did, is also a political game. So maybe I'm contradicting myself right now, and it has to be Ubisoft Toronto and no one else.
Right.
But I'm curious for your takes.
See, it's hard for me to say, because I'm trying to find where we can find the best writing. And it's almost like the way you described Maple and everything, and how you understand like the little pieces and descriptions. I almost want there to be somebody out there where I feel like I'd have to pull in like a team, like contractors. Like, I'm like, okay, what's a Canadian writer that I know about? Well, Mitch Dyer. I feel like I'd have to like pull people in where I'm like, okay, you need somebody who's lived it, who's experienced it, like how you can just speak about it. Cause I think an American game studio could tackle this, but you need Canadians on the inside consulting at the very least at every step of the process.
So I'm looking into, I just did a quick search of Canadian game devs, and now on the Wikipedia of strictly just Canadian game devs. And there's some crazy ones out here. Like, one of them already came to mind before we went to the Canadian media policy thing.
Is it BioWare?
It is BioWare. And I've always, while we're describing this whole game, I'm like, this is a BioWare-esque game without any combat, right? So, like all the choices, branching paths and everything.
I'm saying I would really want like Fulbright to take a stab at this.
Oh, Fulbright would be great. But I mean, would they be able to make a game with this scope though? They make incredible games.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, I don't know how big the scope would be. I almost would want like an all-star cast here, because I want the writing to be on point. It has to be poignant, almost like Ken Levine aspects where, you know, like they're just considering multiple things put together. But you're right. It's tough. I don't have a good answer for this.
I mean,
if we said Ubisoft Toronto, or we said BioWare, scope wise,
yeah,
or even like Square Enix Montreal,
or even
I know
Ideos
that like
Montreal as well. Yeah,
I think they're the same. Aren't they the same?
I think they are, actually, now that you mention it.
Yeah, I'm like, did they change their name to
name
changes?
I am thinking BioWare, like, let's say this is like their comeback game. People are like, wait, what's going on here? Why is BioWare making this game? But I could see them going back to their roots. Because if you think about it, Star Wars The Old Republic is a very political game. Like, you're kind of dealing with light side, dark side. It's not nuanced at all. But I'm seeing them learning from everything else, Mass Effect, and then kind of leaning into it. We're like, hey, guys, we're about RPGs now, but we're creating something totally new. And then coming out with something like this.
Yeah. The last game developer I also had in mind for this game in particular is Hangar 13. The guys behind Mafia 3, specifically because the politicalness of this game. And also, if you have played Mafia 3, there's so many little story elements that if you even do one tiny little difference, they have a cutscene that's fully acted and voice acted for that small little thing that you decided not to do. You know what I mean? Like they have a cutscene if you treated this guy better than this guy, that guy the same as this guy, or that guy higher than these guys. Like they have cutscenes that are fully acted for every single little piece, and it all flows into one bigger storyline. So I feel like they could do it, but also they're American, which I mean, that's the difficult part of this part of the.
I didn't play Mafia 3, but my understanding was that it did some really interesting things, especially with the writing. So yeah, I would trust Hangar 13 because I've read some of the like post game interviews that the writers had done, and they thought a lot about like race and that game. So I would be totally, BioWare, Ubisoft Toronto, or Hangar 13, I think are fantastic candidates.
Yeah. Pricing. This is a full AAA $60.
Yeah, I'm paying $60 for this. Like
full pop, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably 70 depending on how next gen goes, you know, but yeah, it's definitely a full price AAA game.
Oh man, could you imagine like you're just playing on your PS4 and you hear like the social credit system speak over your controller like dun 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 dun. Your score has been updated.
Oh,
that'd be pretty cool.
We wrote a Black Mirror episode, guys.
Definitely. No,
Right?
it definitely is. What are they called? The Black Mirror, the interactive Black Mirrors?
Bandersnatch or
Bandersnatch? This, I know this is lowering the scope by a bunch. But this could definitely be a Black Mirror like interactive show type of deal.
Oh yeah.
All right, Alex, it's time to start your timer because it's time to name this game.
Give me 1 second. Did we discuss what kind of graphics we're gonna have here? Is it just gonna be semi-realistic?
Yeah, realistic-esque.
That's okay. I'm glad we were on.
In
the
my
same
head,
page.
I
just wanna
see
make
Deus
sure.
Ex pretty much is what I'm seeing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Timer is starting now.
I think this game has to be called Wexit.
I was going to say, is that going to be a problem? Calling it Wexit?
No, it's not trademarked, right?
It's not trademarked, but I think it would be a very political move because that word, if you say Wexit to a Canadian, you will get a reaction. Whether it's like, of course, like we aren't represented well in these provinces by the elite in Ottawa, or you'd be like, man, those folks that like there's connotation when you say that word.
Would there be a way to like, you know how there's Wexit, Brexit, and all that stuff? Is there another word we could just make up that has that same naming convention, like Kendexit?
So I was thinking instead of that, I really liked how there was abbreviations like Maple. I was thinking if we could come up with another one that's just Canadian, like essence, like no American is gonna like call their thing Maple. That's like strictly Canadian. I was wondering if we could come up with another abbreviation, but that's really tough. Otherwise, I think Wexit would be fine.
Maybe
right?
Maybe it could be because I think what you're saying is name your social credit system like a kitschy Canadian slang word.
Yeah,
and it could be an acronym,
like special
right?
from Fallout and stuff like that. Yeah. That would be genius if we could just think of something on the spot like that, because that would be great if that social credit system had a abbreviation that was cute like Maple. You know what I mean?
Could you find a way to make Maple work into like a social credit system?
Or what's the abbreviation for the Canadian currency? Is it CAD?
Yeah, it's CAD.
Okay.
Why did you ask that?
Because I'm trying to see if I can reword that abbreviation into the credit score system. Like I was thinking about.
What if that we name the country that comes out of those provinces, like making their own like autonomous country, and just call it something like New Canada or like Western Canada, West Canada, something like that.
Yeah, we could.
The fall of Western Canada. No, don't want to do that.
What?
We could say.
What's the biggest Western Canadian city? Is it? I don't want to sound dumb here. Is it Toronto?
No, please sound. No, it's Toronto is like east, and it's the largest city in the country. But the three provinces I told you about at the beginning were Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. I believe the largest city in those provinces would be Calgary.
Okay. I was thinking about like just doing maybe a semicolon or like a little place marker where it's like New Canada, the rise and fall of, and then like I don't know what to put in there, because even then,
what if it's Wexit, the fall of New Canada?
there we go.
Whoa,
Yeah, I really like
Wexit,
that.
The Fall of New Canada. That's an epic name.
At 2 minutes and 17 seconds. At this point, I know that I should describe, like I usually describe the game here, but if you can, Jacob, I feel like this is where I have to pass it on to you, because you would be the best at describing your idea and going from there and giving a little blurb of how to like sell it.
The back of the box
Sure.
description.
Okay. In a near future, autonomous Western Canada, a social credit system has been instituted to mixed praise. You play an unnamed teenager who unravels the mystery of the social credit system and the politics of this new autonomous land.
That was fantastic.
All right.
Well, wow, that just came right out, eh? Whew.
So I think we have a game here, Jacob, Alex. What do you guys think? Would this be a game you'd want to play? And is it fun? Jacob?
I want to play it, 1. 2, would it be fun? I think in a certain way, like as a Canadian, it would hurt me to play, because like it kind of perpetuates that division is going to get worse in this country. I think it may be painful to play also, but like incredibly engrossing at the same time. So like, yes, hell yuck, I want to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yuck. Hell yes, I want to play it.
And as for me, this game has my interest utterly and completely. First off, what I've learned through this episode is I don't know anything about Canada.
Right.
So
That's
finally,
exactly what
I'd
I
have a
found out.
game where it's not realistic, but I would pick up on the culture. I'd pick up on maybe how people are feeling, how different provinces feel, how the government works a little bit, you know? And then I was thinking about this. I haven't really immersed myself in a game where the setting is mainly Canada and it's realistic, you know? Like they just kind of throw it out there, hey, you're in Canada, and then nothing really changes.
Yeah.
So this would be the first time I'd really get to see all that. And for once, I think for me, it would be really nice and a breath of fresh air not to be in America.
Right. Are there
And not
any
Japan.
Are there any main like big games that take place in Canada, like Quebec or Toronto?
I can name a few. So did you play the horror game Soma?
No, but I know of it.
Soma starts in Toronto.
Okay.
There's an adventure game called Kona. It is based
Okay.
in like northern Quebec, and it's like, what if Firewatch was in northern Quebec?
Way
okay.
awesome is what I could imagine.
I mean, it doesn't have the same like quality as that, but like it's kind of cops the same vibe. And
Yeah, 'cause
those are the two. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying Canada's beautiful. And I mean, Yellowstone is one of the most beautiful places in America. So I feel like a Firewatch-esque game that takes place in Canada would be pretty cool.
Yeah, and then the last one that I can share is The Long Dark is actually based in Canada too.
I definitely heard of that. Unfortunately, I haven't ever played any of those, but I would play the hell out of this game. This is one of those games where while I'm playing it, I feel smart. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever played those? You've never played those games where you're like, this game is teaching me stuff and I feel smart. Like, you've never played a game like that? Like, Civilization 6. is definitely one of those games that makes me feel smarter. Like I'm playing it, I'm learning about all these cool wonders, and I'm learning about different politics.
I think I see what you're saying is you start to feel more worldly.
Yeah.
You're learning about different culture. So you start to feel like you know, I guess in my brain, it would take away the fog of Canada a little bit more.
Like let's take,
instead of it being just the main things that people think about.
Let's take Ghost of Tsushima, even, for example, where I was playing through that and I'm like, man, I am learning a lot about Japan during this period. I mean, I already knew a decent amount, but they're giving me more context to it. Yeah, so like I feel like this is one of those type of games where while I'm playing it, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm learning something that I probably should have already known, but now I'm learning it by playing this pretty awesome video game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like I don't know about you guys, but like I didn't really get politically active until I was like 25 years old, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, I didn't really understand things until like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And like I only know like stuff about US politics, one, because I grew up in a border town, and two, because like your politics are more entertaining, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Whereas ours, like as an American, like I bet you couldn't name like the 4 major parties or the 5 major parties that we have in this country, and it's fine. Because it's not like we're a smaller country and you have your own problems to deal with, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's fine.
See, I would take a stab. Just like if I were on a game show, I'd be like, I know Labor's got to be one of them. It's always one, right?
No, but
it's in the UK. Dang.
There's a Labor Party, but they're like bottom of the not bottom of the barrel, but like they're a small party, very small.
Okay.
Like
but there's a party
always
that is focused on labor. You're right.
Yeah, I was like, there's always somebody representing the workers. There's always somebody out there.
Yeah, they're called the New Democrats here.
Oh man.
And with that, our 118th episode, IP has gone gold. We hope you look forward to this experience that will probably never release. You could write to @poundgames@gmail.com if you have anything passionate to the game we created today. Also, give us feedback. We're still learning how to make this show better, and your feedback really helps. We have a Patreon. If you'd like to back our ideas, please head over to patreon.com/wearenotgamedevs. Patrons receive episodes 2 days early and an extra podcast at the beginning, which you caught the tail end of our conversation at the beginning of this episode. That's patreon.com/wearenotgamedevs. If you liked our show, why not subscribe and give us all the stars on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, YouTube, and more. And if they ask for a review, instead of reviewing our show, become your inner game critic and review Wexit, The Rise and Fall of New Canada. Is that the whole title?
Yeah, I like that.
The video game we just created. Thank you so much, Jacob, for coming on once again. Real quick, if you'd like to give any shout outs or anything you'd like to promote here, now is your time.
Yeah, so thank you for having me back on. After I was on the episode where we talked about Steel City, this idea started to germinate, and I think I DM'd you, Jay, and I was like, I have another idea. I can't get it out of my head, and I need to talk about it with someone. So thank you for having me back. I make 2 podcasts. One, as you mentioned, is brand new. It's called Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast, where we rewatch video game movies and talk about them. I also have a gaming podcast called the Left Behind Game Club, where we kind of do the same, but for video games. If you wanted to listen to those, I would be eternally grateful. You can find me on social media at Jacob McCourt on all major social media platforms. I sometimes make YouTube videos too. You can find those at youtube.com/Jacob McCourt. Basically, I just hate free time. That's what I'm telling you with all of these things. So if you decide to check something I do out, great. If not, you're listening to a great show. So like, keep doing that.
Yeah, and
thank you so much for coming on, because this idea would never have come out of Jay or I's brain. So it's great. Like, it's great to explore this idea that you had. Thank you for bringing it today.
It was definitely a pleasure having you, Jacob. And both your podcasts, highly entertaining and very, very well-produced shows. So go check those 2 shows out for sure. And thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next Friday with another new IP. Again, my name is Jay Yee.
And I'm Alexander Gonzalez.
And that's your part, Jacob.
We are not game devs.
Oh, no, I just meant And Jacob McCourt.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, I don't say that we are not game devs. Let me say it again. And I'm Jacob McCourt.
Yes. Thank you. And please remember that we are not game devs. Real quick.
Perfect.
I'd never said what my knowledge of Canadian politics are, but let me tell you, it is that at one point there was a guy named Greg Miller running for some political office at some point in your history.
Gosh.
I think he was running for like municipal government in Calgary.
And now that we're at the end,
biggest city on the west side of Canada. Yeah.
Yep. And now that we're at the end here, I know too much because of Reddit about what's going on at Tim Hortons. Once it was good, now it's not, and I think it's
Now
gone to
it's not
absolute
good.
shit.
It's gone to shit. It's not good. Let me tell you, it's not good.